Welcome to the CNS Podcast featuring Dr. Daryl Anaba, Research Director for CNS Productions.
I had lunch the other day with our psychiatrist and medical director of Genesis, which is now unfortunately closed due to the economy situation. But Dr. Abraham Ganak, always a fascinating person, a person who keeps right on the cutting edge of what's developing in the medical, psychiatric, and substance abuse treatment field. And he pointed me out, or he directed me to the fact that in 2001, Portugal became the first country, actually it's the first time, probably the first time ever, but a country that enacted a decriminalization of drug use. And people have been watching Portugal ever since to see what the impact of that legislation was. And you've got, as you would predict, polarization where one side's claiming great results from decriminalization and the other side's claiming, well, we had some good things, but we had some bad things, and we really have to look at this more carefully, and we have to decide in Portugal whether we're going to continue to keep drugs decriminalized. I think what's missing in this, though, especially for people in this country who are now lobbying the president to decriminalize drugs, and especially decriminalize marijuana like the Portuguese have done with all drugs. Well, let's at least start with marijuana. I think what we have to be very careful of is we have to really look to see what Portugal did. And Portugal did an amazingly innovative thing. The major thing people have to understand is decriminalization is not legalization. There's a total difference between legalization of drugs and decriminalization of drugs. Portugal decriminalized drugs, making use, possession, and having drugs around you as not a criminal crime, but it's still illegal to possess drugs in Portugal. So what they did, and I think it's pretty unique, is they created an investment into the demand side of the war on drugs that every nation is supposedly waging. And like every nation, like our nation, we spend most of our time on the supply side of the equation of trying to stop drug abuse in our country. There's a supply side, and then there's a demand side. And we make the big mistake for about 200 years, I think, of spending most of our dollars trying to prevent drugs from entering the country and hitting the street. And we spend a much less of our dollar on actually providing treatment and prevention and education about drugs. Well, Portugal, with their decriminalization, really invested in the demand side. They created sort of local groups comprised of treatment person, legislator, interventionists, and anybody who gets caught with drugs. This little cadre of people go in and they assess whether that drug use is a addiction use or it's sort of a social recreational use or experimental use or whatever. So they actually make that determination. And if it's a experimental use or social use, they still enact sanctions. They find the person, they tell the person that they can't be around certain areas of the city, they've lost certain privileges of the city, but they don't arrest that person, they don't put them in jail. They actually do find some of the recreational users. If they find that the person that is caught possessing drugs actually has a addiction problem or a heavy abuse problem, they put that person into treatment and they put that person into education. And so even though Portugal is a small country, they took all of the money that would have usually been spent on prosecuting courts, keeping people in jail, and use that money to create a treatment alternative, which is a demand reduction strategy. What's happened so far in the 7 years or so, 8 years now, that decriminalization has been going on in Portugal is that there's been a dramatic increase in the abuse of marijuana. So marijuana has increased. Cocaine has increased slightly. Also, ecstasy has come into use. Now, the critics of the decriminalization say decriminalization gave the wrong message to young people and other people, saying that it was okay, that drug use was okay, it wasn't bad, and we're not going to really harm you in any way if you continue to abuse drugs. And so that's why the abuse of those drugs increased. The supporters of decriminalization say that it really wasn't that. What it was in Europe, all around them, there was an increase in the same rate of marijuana, cocaine, and ecstasy use. So they're just experiencing what is going on in Europe all around them. The amazing thing, though, is that Portugal enacted decriminalization because they were being inundated with heroin in 2001. HIV from injection of heroin was skyrocketing, and decriminalization was really focused on, can we stem the heroin addiction problem, and can we promote healthier alternatives? And that's what has happened. The abuse of heroin has greatly decreased in Portugal. HIV, Hep C, Hep B have greatly decreased in Portugal. So in that perspective, it is a great success. If you look at every single statistics that they talk about, crime has decreased, street activities have decreased. A lot of good things have happened, some bad things have happened, but every single statistic and data they looked at, there's a polarization in how that's interpreted and whether it's a good thing or bad thing. I think mostly though, most researchers have looked at what's happened in Portugal and have felt that decriminalization has been a success in Portugal. It made treatment more, it just raised the consciousness that people have addiction problems and can get treated within the addicts themselves. It made treatment available. It allowed for better access to treatment, and a number of people have taken great advantage. There's more people in treatment than there ever was. And they were smart enough to also invest in increasing treatment resources. So not only were they intervening, they're getting more people look at their drug use, but they also had actual treatment availability for them if they decided to go into treatment. Well, I don't know overall about the whole decriminalization issue, but I do think it's something we need to look at in this country. Why is there a treatment gap? Why is there an awareness gap? Why are people who want and need treatment unable to access it? And if we do that, maybe we can have an actual victory of some sort on our war on drugs.
That wraps our pod for today. Thanks for visiting the CNS Podcast. Please check back soon for the next in the series and visit our website, www.cnsproductions.com.